Welcome back to our last video, the 10th and final question in our 10 question series on your DIY, your do-it-yourself bestseller program. And the last video, it was only going to be a 9-part course, and then we discussed amongst ourselves, didn't we, Brad, uh, the fact that there is another topic, and it's how will you prevent self-sabotage? And it really comes down to mindset here because we see this all the time. Both Brad and I work as coaches, and we consult with a lot of people, and I would consider Brad, you and I, to be very productive people. We don't really have a lot of time to procrastinate. We've been able to overcome a lot of these things, but a lot of people we work with haven't, and people do sabotage themselves. They do get 90% into a project and then quit or don't finish or somehow get busy doing something else instead of the thing that's most important, and that's finishing a book. So why don't we talk about some of the things that you did personally? I know some of the things you did specifically with your launch date and working with affiliates worked very well. Let's talk about your examples first, and then maybe go into a bit more of a mindset discussion here as well. How did you prevent sabotage, or were you never even concerned about that?
Um, I wasn't really concerned about it, but because, like you said, you and I have kind of been through this with digital products in the past, where, um, excuse me, I'm past the self sabotage phase, but I do believe that it's, um, you know what, I shouldn't say that because I did kind of along the way I started books and then didn't finish them because it wasn't right.
Okay, at previous
So,
times, you mean?
so yeah, because I didn't take all the other steps that we've discussed, right?
Gotcha.
So if I had followed everything to the letter that we had discussed, then I wouldn't have self-sabotaged. The first book I think was going to be called Global Conversation or some other crap. I can't even remember now. It was just so bad. And so I self-sabotaged it because it needed to be self-sabotaged. um, um, so yeah, I guess I am guilty of it too. I think we're all guilty of it, but it was also, I think deep down in my heart I knew that it wasn't right. And so if you've done any of these steps and you felt like that it wasn't genuine, then you need to go back and revisit. I think that's the first part. The second part is once you've gotten to the point where your heart's in it, right? It's like anything. It's like going on a diet, right? If your spouse says to you, "We should go on a diet," and you're like, "Yeah, we should," and then you all of a sudden get sucked into this diet, you're not going to feel awesome about it. But like if you one day you look in the mirror and you see a little too much fat, and you're like, "Oh my God, I got to change this," then you'll be motivated to do that. So your mind has to be in it. So you have to have taken all the other steps before this with pure honesty and not cutting any corners and not compromising any of those steps, right? Especially things like the provocative title. This is the kind of stuff that can make or break your book launch. So that stuff's important first. Your heart has to be in the game, or none of this other stuff's going to matter. But then you need to start publicly committing to the book launch date, so even if it's not finished. I actually didn't. My book was done. It wasn't edited, but it was done. My work was done when I started talking about launch dates, and I could have easily, written the book and not ever published it, not done the final edit round. I could have easily self-sabotaged or focused on something shiny and new in my business, which you and I are we do it all the time, right? It's not a bad thing. It's just the way we run our businesses. It's like one project leads to another one that's more lucrative than the one we originally dreamed up, and we keep following the money. You may do that with your book. So what I started to do was I started to publicly commit. And Cialdini talks about this in his influence book, right? Where by making public commitments and declarations, you now will align yourself with those pieces of information, or those, you'll want to become honest to your word.
It's an identity
Um,
you've given yourself, and human beings are inclined to keep the identity that they claim for themselves. So you start telling
yeah,
everybody that you're doing this now you have to, or else you're a liar, and that's too
exactly.
painful.
What I started doing was I started announcing it to my list with the calendar invites, with the hey, book's coming out on April 20th and all that kind of stuff. And I started announcing it on Facebook to my friends through social media and that kind of stuff. And even like, old high school friends commenting on that made me want to make sure that I followed through. It's a stupid thing that what motivates us, like people that I hated in high school are now motivating me to get my book done. But like, somehow it works, right? People, you say, my book's coming out on this date, and people that doubted you once in your life are commenting on that. That's going to actually solidify that commitment to do that. It's a stupid little thing, but we're all motivated by different things. For me, it's not always money. Sometimes it's, I'll show them. So, sometimes
Everybody's
you have
like
to
that.
kind of,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
sometimes you have to think about it that way. And then the other thing that I did that was actually probably the most powerful was I had a talk to do in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I announced my book launch date on stage. And I put a slide up that said, I even was so bold as to say, I was doing an about me, as you do in your talks. I was doing my slides and I was doing a little bit of an about me. And I said, and then just recently, I got to number one on ClickBank in my category for this. And my hope is that next year I'll be able to come to you and tell you this about myself. And I immediately showed a screen that had a cover of my book, and it said, best-selling author, uh, 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 something like best-selling author, and had the book launch date, and, all in one slide. I literally declared, long before I had any expectations of how well the book was going to do, that I was expecting to be a bestseller. So I not only declared that my book would be out on that day, but I declared that I was going to bring my awesomeness to make it a bestseller. So I really put my my reputation on the line by saying that, because saying that your book is going to launch on a certain day is easy, right? You release your book and it's launched, right? Nobody bought it. Your mom bought it,
But you still
but
follow through on your
it's
goal.
yeah, exactly. So I actually took it a step further, and I declared that I was going to make it a bestseller. And I said, I'm hoping for this. I didn't say I'm guarantee I'm going to do this, or I'll pay each and every one of you $1,000. It wasn't like that. It was just by committing to doing that, right? It's like saying I'm going to win this race. Well,
Yeah.
now you're going to train harder to win the race because you want to win it. So, um, publicly declare that you're going to do that. Publicly declare what your goal is for the book, not just that it's going to be out, but what it's going to do.
Yeah.
Um, and whether that's by, maybe you don't have a platform where you can show up on a stage and tell 200 people that you're going to have your book out on a certain day. Maybe that's a YouTube video that only 20 people watch. It's still you making a commitment to have these goals in line on this day. And you'll be amazed at how your brain will work to make those things happen when you declare them in advance. If you
Absolutely.
don't, your brain will find all kinds of shortcuts and reasons why you don't have to do this. But if you
Yeah.
tell everyone you're doing it, that changes the whole world for you. Now you have to. You have to follow through.
Yeah, and the question for this chapter is how to prevent self-sabotage. Literally what you're doing here is you're making it impossible by deliberately putting yourself into an environment where you're going to you're just going to follow through. And this
I'm going to suffer embarrassment and ridicule if I don't follow through.
and that's a great test to how badly you want this thing to succeed. Again, that you picked up a program here called DIY bestseller. You're not just dabbling. You want to become a bestseller, so you need to be willing to do what it takes to get to that status. And I think I've told you this story before, Brad, but I used the exact same principle years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, when I was doing a fundraiser, and I declared in a local paper a local goal, but that there was still tens of thousands of people who read that paper that I was going to raise a certain amount of money for a charity. I declared I was going to raise $25,000 for a kids charity in 17 days because that was the day this particular drive or fundraiser was ending. And long story short, I fell short of the goal quite a bit. I raised $7,200, but that was $7,200 I wouldn't have come close to raising without that public declaration. I remember doing after that article in the paper, I was just freaking out. I was like, why would I do that? I was so mad at myself. But I remember walking into high schools and public schools and all different kinds of organizations doing this talk, like just speaking to whoever would listen to, saying, here's what I'm trying to do. Things I never would have dreamed of doing if I just kind of silently set the goal. If I just said, oh, it'd be kind of nice if I was to raise this money. Because I had told so many people I was going to do this, I found myself on a daily and sometimes hourly basis and sometimes staying up all night long doing things that I just wouldn't have done before because of that public declaration, because of the basically making the commitment before the result. And it literally forced me to do things that I never dreamed were possible, which is pretty cool when you think about it. And I'm still to this day, that's one of my more proud accomplishments, that $7,200, because I know for sure, had I not done that public declaration, it probably would have been a couple $100 that I raised, if that.
Yeah. My hope was to be number one on Amazon for at least an hour,
Right.
right? And I got to number 40 on Amazon. So I made the top 50. I made the top 40. I made the top 100. I didn't get to number one, but I made it into all these lists. So I didn't get to my ultimate bestseller goal either. And I don't mean I made it to number one in all my categories. I made it to number 40 Amazon overall,
Yeah.
all products on Amazon. So that's a pretty good number to get to, but it's shy of the number one spot that I had hoped for. I actually thought my book would be above 50 Shades of Grey for an hour. I thought I could. And actually, if I had managed to force all my sales into the first hour, that may have happened for that hour. But people don't always buy in the hour that you expect them to. So,
Yeah.
but I think it's important to understand that without that ingredient of public declaration, it's so important. Without that, like even if it's just you standing up at your family dinner table and telling your family that you're going to do it, that's powerful. Because without that, you will your brain will negotiate with itself along the way and be like, well, I guess what, we could probably settle for this, and we didn't tell anybody we were going to do it this way, so why don't we change this? And you'll bit by bit you will negotiate with yourself for a compromise. And if you make that declaration, you won't. It's just that simple.
Yeah, it's powerful. I mean, this goes way beyond publishing a book. This concept works for any area of your life where you want to make a permanent and lasting change. So use it in the context of writing your book, but I'd recommend using it everywhere where you want to have some really big changes happening in your life. That is a great summary, and I'm so glad we decided to include that 10th video, Brad, because I think without it, this whole DIY project for people could fall short. You could do all those things we talked about, right up to the publicity step, but if you don't go to work on getting your book out there and doing all the things we recommended in the previous 9 videos, there's a very good chance that the whole DIY bestseller will fall short. So do whatever you possibly can to hold yourself accountable to doing what it takes to making this an awesome project for yourself and making it a bestseller. Do you have anything to add before we close off?
I just want to say, for everybody who's gone through this, I want to wish you the best of luck with your process. I know that we can obviously sit here with the benefit of hindsight and give you all the tips. You're going to have to obviously break a lot of ground for yourself. Hopefully this has provided a bit of a blueprint to make that easier for you. But I think I speak for both of us when I say that we really do hope that you actually follow through on this and become a best-selling author. And if you do, we would love to hear from you. If this has been helpful to you, or if you've been able to implement some of these elements and it's assisted you in your book launch, please reach out to Justin or myself through Twitter or Facebook and let us know. We'd love to hear from you.
Thanks very much for watching.